Welcome back everyone, thank you for joining me. I'm going to do my Junk Journal July prompt for prompt number 20. Sorry about the shadows, I've got all the lights on, but this is about as good as it's going to get today unless it suddenly clears up outside, but I don't think so. It's been raining hard most of the day and I've been putting off this video in the hope that we might get a bit of sunshine, but I think it's in for the day now. I do have a little bit of an idea for this page and also for this one. What I originally thought of using is this little envelope that I made a good wee while ago, just out of some book page, and I've stitched around it, and I just thought I would have it on my page like that, and I would do an origami locking letter to go in the pocket and just keep it really simple. But I wasn't sure what to do on this page for contrast, so I think I've more or less dispensed with that idea, and what I have lifted out is this vintage document, and I'm going to use this on my background. Now what I'm thinking is I will use a portion on this page for letter to myself and the rest of it on this page for contrast. So that's as far as I've got really, other than I want to use this vintage envelope and it's too wide for my page. I don't want it up there, I want it in there like that. So what I thought I would do would be to make a flap and tip it in somehow and do something like this on it. If you've watched my channel, you'll know that I did these absolutely ages ago. This was an old vintage envelope. Well, they both were really, but this one, if I open that up, you can see I had to reinforce it in here and then stitch through it, but I've left it all open. I can seal it up if I need to, but I've just left it as is. And this one I embroidered on the envelope. It was very fragile. Then I backed it with some cardstock. You can probably just make out the lines of the back of the envelope through the cardstock there. So once I'd embroidered through it, I put this on the back, machine stitched all the way around, so that's what it looks like. So I thought that I would keep it very neutral on this side and then maybe go in with another envelope on this side, also embroidered but brightly coloured, so that I've got the contrast between the two. And what I thought I could do is put a letter to myself inside here when I have finished embroidering it. So this is the one I'm going to concentrate with first of all. I'm not going to glue this in place yet because I want to tuck it underneath there like that and then have it coming across my page. So here I am just trimming my page to size, and it fits nicely across both pages. I'm just testing out where my envelope needs to be so that I can create the flap, which is what I'm doing here, slotting it behind to see if it's where I want it to be. I've just put a piece of vintage ledger paper down the left hand side and just trimming across the top there. The reason I've done that is because there's a piece on the right hand side and I want the pages to match. So here I'm just going in with a pencil and I'm just roughly sketching out very lightly where my flowers are going to be, and I decide I want a little bit of a scroll over the top there. Decide I don't like that bit so rubbing it out, going in again, a little bit more at the bottom there, and you'll see me go in and rub out these pencil marks after I've done my stitching, going in with that scroll again. Nope, still don't like it. But the joy of working with pencil is you can rub it out and draw it in again. And even when I have decided on my scroll up there, I still add a bit more later on. So just doing some final little bits of tweaking to it. So here you see me opening up the envelope completely. I decide that I'm going to glue it shut and create a false back to this after I've done the embroidery. So there I am with my Pritt stick, and I'm gluing it all together. And here I'm just choosing some threads that I think will be right for my page, keeping this side very neutral and picking up my colour really from the stamp that's up there, which is a lovely grey colour. I'm working in DMC thread, which is a stranded cotton, as we call it here in the UK. In the US, you call it floss, I believe. So here I'm using my needle to punch where my stitches are going to be on the front of the envelope, because obviously stitching with paper, you don't want lots of hole marks showing. Normally, if you're stitching fabric, you obviously create your stitches from the back, and if it's not quite right, you pull your needle out and go in from the back again. Every time you do that on paper, especially a vintage document, it will show as a hole in the paper. It's not sort of self-healing like fabric is. So here I am, as I've just said, I'm marking where my stitches are going to go by making a little hole on the front. You quite often see me put my needle in the front and then turn it over and put my needle in from the back, and that's just so that I can see where that tiny little hole I've made in the front is on the back. After I've done my stitches, I've just added a little dab of art glitter glue just to hold my thread in place. Even though I will be putting a backing on this, I still do that. And here I am rubbing out my pencil marks, as I said. So they were just straight, long straight stitches I did there for the stems of my flowers and my grass at the bottom. Here I'm doing a fly stitch at the top to do the scroll work, and as you can see, I'm punching where I need to do my stitches from the front, as I've just mentioned. I thought I'd slow it right down so that you can see how long it takes to sew in real time. This stitching on this envelope took me about two full days to stitch. So it's slow when you stitch or do embroidery on fabric. It is even slower when you do it through paper, especially if it's a fragile vintage document like this envelope. And you will see me go in later on, and I actually used some tape on the back of this envelope because it really wasn't standing up to some of the close stitching that I needed to do. For example, where I needed to do a cluster of French knots. So you'll see that in a minute. So as I say, to do this scroll work, I'm just doing some extended fly stitch. I think that's quite pretty. And you'll also see me go in after I've done my stitching using my bone folder to actually smooth out the stitching on the front and also on the reverse of the envelope, the same as I do when I machine stitch, and it just flattens the paper down around the hole that you've created where your needle has gone through, whether it's from a sewing machine or from a hand needle as I'm using here. And in terms of what needle I'm using, well, I try and use the smallest possible needle because I want the smallest possible hole in my paper. So I'm actually sewing with my all-time favourite, which is a size 10 straw needle. But I have to say that by the end of sewing this envelope, it was blunt and it was severely bent. So they are such fine needles. They're great to work with, especially if you're hand sewing on paper, but it does take its toll on them. So here, as I've mentioned, I'm just going in with my bone folder and just gently going over and around my stitches to try and flatten the paper around the holes where the needle has gone through, and just holding it up to the camera. That's where I've done a cluster of French knots and I've stopped. I've decided, no, this paper isn't going to stand up to the amount that I'm going to be doing along the bottom there. So I've just got here some masking tape, nothing special. In the past, I have just backed my envelopes with more paper glued on. I decided to use masking tape rather. It's absolutely great, but it can be a little bit sticky in terms of some residue from the tape, the adhesive on the tape getting on your needle. So I was constantly wiping my needle between my thumb and index finger to remove that residue. But it did an amazing job in terms of making it really robust on the back of that vintage envelope. So more thread there, quilter's knot in the back, and I'm going in here with oodles and oodles of my favourite stitch, which is French knots. So I go all along the bottom in one colour, then I pick up another shade of blue or grey, do some more. They're not true French knots in terms of they're not just 2 or maybe 3 wraps. I'm doing 6, 7 and even 8 wraps. But when I come to do the main vegetation along the bottom, I do some very, very loose French knots. So there you are, you can see those very loose French knots along the bottom. I've drawn in some more pencil lines with that for that swirl up at the top, and I've added a few straight lines on my foliage at the bottom because I want to add some stem stitch there. So here I am choosing some more thread, and I worked most of this in a single strand of DMC thread. A couple of the very loose French knots at the bottom I did with a double strand of DMC thread, but nothing heavier than that. So just trying to decide which angle I want to go in at. And again, punching my holes. And this is just simple stem stitch for these additional little touches to the swirl at the top. So in all, I've probably only used a few stitches. I used fly stitch, extended fly stitch, stem stitch and French knots, true French knots, and as I said, some with extra wraps and then some with very loose wraps, and that's it really. It's amazing what you can do with just a few stitches. So as you can see, I've done my swirls at the top, and then I think I add about 4 lines of stem stitch in amongst the vegetation at the bottom, just for a bit more interest really. Nothing for no other reason than that. I was really pleased how that tape made that envelope quite robust. And here I am, sorry about my head, but I was leaning over to see what I was doing. So here I am again, just flattening down my stitches with my bone folder. And I go in with another sheet of paper which I fold in half, and one side I glue to the back of my envelope to hide all that stitching, and the other is to create a pocket so that I can tuck my letter to myself in the pocket. And then I go all the way around the outside with a couple of lines of straight stitching on my sewing machine. So this is my finished envelope, and I have to say I'm really, really pleased how it's come out. It was a lot of work. It took a couple of days to do. Embroidering on fabric is a slow process, but embroidering on vintage documents is even slower. So consequently, there was so much hyperlapse. So I do apologise for that if you found it annoying, but there will be close-up photos at the end of this video so that you can see in more detail what I've done, and I've also gone on to finish the background, but I'm keeping that until I actually start working on this one so that you can see the 2 pages and the 2 prompts in their entirety. So I'm going to pause the video now, or rather end the video now, let you see the photographs for this. I really do hope you'll pop back and join me for prompt 21, which is contrast, which is this page, as I keep saying, and you will then be able to see this page in its entirety finished off. So until then, happy crafting everybody, take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.